Mambo family, this is your brother Team Africa Worldwide, spokesman for the organization WeChargeColonialism. Habari ya Asubuhi. The words I'm using are Kiswahili words. Mambo means hello, and Habari ya Asubuhi means how is your morning. And I always like to open with words from that Bantu language and close with words from that Bantu language because the only reason that I'm speaking the tongue that I'm speaking, which is English, is due to the fact that my ancestors had English-speaking oppressors. So with that being said, today's topic is colorism and Pan-Afrikanism. This is a very complex topic, and in fact, this is the first time that I've ever attempted to rehearse for a video because it is a lot more complex than I thought it was. This topic was inspired by a conversation I had with a very old friend of mine all the way back from high school. Good friend from high school, love him to death. High school would not have been the same without him. I had wished him a Happy New Year via text last month, and then when he got back to me, he congratulated me on my YouTube channel, and he expressed that he wanted to go to Africa. He asked me how African Americans were received in Africa, being that we have mixed blood. And my first response was, they're not tripping on that. It's a non-issue. Most of the times, they can't even recognize whether or not you're African American until they hear your accent. And if you see a lot of them, if they were in America, you would not recognize that they were not African American until you hear their accent. And he responded, well, will it be different from a brother from my complexion? And my response was, there are light-skinned people in Africa, which there are. And I don't mean mixed people. I mean, you have Fulanis in the West, you have Kikuyus in the East, and you have the Colors in South Africa, and then you have people in North Africa who claim not to be of Arab descent, who are also like, so that was the first thing I said to him in response. And then I also said that you're still more African than any Chinese person, any European person, or any Arab person that lives on the continent and is accepted. And he was like, all right, thanks. But after that conversation, I thought about it. And I was like, man, I really didn't empathize. I really didn't put my feet in his shoes to attempt to see it through his eyes. And so I had to step back and do that. And one thing I must admit is that colorism is a big problem in the African world, be it on the continent or here in the United States or anywhere else in the diaspora. Colorism is a problem in Asian communities and Latino communities as well. That's because the world is dominated by a system called white supremacy. And because the world is dominated by that system called white supremacy, this has affected the minds of everybody on the globe. And So I can't deny that, something like that goes on. I always have just seen black as black because, my immediate family, meaning my mother, my father, my sister, and myself, we are four different complexions. We range from, you know, um, light light skin, dark skin, I guess light dark skin and dark skin. And so because of that, I just always saw black as black, and it never was an issue to me. But, then I had to realize that, um, you know, my mother has told stories about things that she went through being a light skinned African American that my sister and I didn't have to go through. And my dad, being the dark skinned African American, he's told us stories about things he went through that we didn't have to go through. So I have to keep that in mind. But I also reflect back on a video that our founder, Attorney Cherie, did a few months back, called Claiming uh, Your African Identity. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter who accepts your Africanness, as long as you accept it, as long as you know who you are. You're going to run into people who are not going to identify with you for all types of reasons. Some people might not identify with you just because you have a different social economic background than them. Some people might not identify with you because of lifestyle choices, whether you drink or whether you smoke. Some people may not identify with you because you like to read and they don't, or vice versa. And especially black people, I mean, we are always looking for reasons to divide ourselves, and not just with colorism, but with anything. I mean, black people, unfortunately shoot each other because of streets we don't own, as Jay-Z said, streets that our mamas are renting because I live on this street and you live on that street. So with that being said, claim who you are as an African. And when you go to Africa, I doubt if you run into any problems, but if you run into anybody like that, dismiss that person and keep it moving. There will always be people there who will embrace you, and that will be the majority, believe me. Um, and unfortunately, you might get received even better than I was received because of colorism. There's also benefits. There are people who value light skinned black people more than dark skinned black people. So, I mean, because there is actually a bleaching epidemic in certain parts of the continent where people are using creams to make themselves lighter and different techniques to make themselves lighter. I don't know how much that occurs with the men, but I know it's a problem in some areas with the women. So I would not let anybody tell me I'm less African because I have light skin, especially when they're accepting Europeans, they're accepting Asians, they're accepting Arabs, and they're not going to accept an African American uh, due to not being 100% African when, um, whether we know it or not, a lot of continental Africans aren't 100% African. And if they're Arab, Chinese, or European, then they probably are 0% African unless you go back 40,000 years. So um, my thing is all about unity of African people worldwide. That's the only way that we will defeat pan-Europeanism. A lot of people use the term white supremacy. I don't really like to use that because I don't feel like anybody is supreme over me. It's just a system of white supremacy. But pan-Europeanism, that's the problem. And the only way we can overcome it is using Pan-Africanism, and that's the deal. And so I'm not going to be unsympathetic and say that colorism doesn't exist uh, in the African world and that it doesn't exist on the continent. But I don't think that it's an obstacle that we can't go over, through, under, and around, just like many obstacles. So know who you are, know who your ancestors are, and claim the continent because it's yours. And and I guess I will close with that. I hope that you all got something from that. Um, I really struggled with how I was going to go about this, and I hope that it turned out okay. What I want to say is, in spite of what shade of color we may be, African Americans in the United States or Africans in America are a colonized people. We are treated less than first class citizens. People used to say second class citizens. It may be even lower than that. There's disparities in everything, from income to education to healthcare, and we don't have control over anything. And so, what I'm going to do is invite you to go to our website, WeChargeColonialism.org, and learn more about the organization, what our strategies are, and what our tactics are, and what projects we have coming up. And with that being said, uh, Kwaherini Kwasasa, which means goodbye for now.